The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. It's mating season for eagles on Vancouver Island. Mike Yip says everybody recognizes the eagle, but not everyone is aware of what the raptors get up to month to month. The Nanoose Bay-based amateur photographer is getting ready to launch A Year of Eagles, a book he's self-publishing next month. On today's show, we'll learn about eagles and other birds of prey you might find around the island. We'll hear from Derek Downs of the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center, but we begin with the story of how a chance encounter with some ducks sparked a decades-long passion.
I'm Mike Yip. I'm an amateur photographer specializing in birds, and I've also self-published a number of books.
And what made you want to chronicle A Year of Eagles?
Well, first of all, my books were mainly about birds, and I tell everybody the birds made me do it. It's I sort of like a messenger from the birds trying to educate the public about birds and nature. And I had my last book had covered basically all the common birds on Vancouver Island, and so I thought maybe people would be interested in hearing more about the bald eagle, and so it was the bald eagle that inspired me to produce a book on its life during the year.
And what did you learn about eagles after seeing them through the camera lens?
Well, I learned a lot about them. There's, for example, one thing about not just eagles but other birds is that food trumps fear, which means that, the birds initially seem to be quite wary of you, but if there happens to be food close by, then they're not quite as fearful as you think.
What was your journey of becoming a wildlife photographer? Like you mentioned, you're doing this as an amateur photographer, and you've gone to the point where you're self-publishing books of your photos. What was that journey like?
Well, it was very exciting. First, when I retired, I was a teacher, and I retired in 2001, and I retired right to the golf course. And I didn't really have much interest in birds at that time, but in 2004, our golf was canceled because of a frost delay, and so I took a drive and I spotted some weird ducks in a swamp, and I was just actually fascinated and mesmerized. I sat there and watched them for half an hour. Then I went home and grabbed the camera and tried to take some pictures with my old film camera, and the pictures totally did not turn out. There was not a single good picture at all. And so that was like a challenge from those ducks. Those ducks challenged me to do better, and I took up the challenge, and I've never looked back since. Did
you get a better picture of one of those kinds of ducks?
Eventually, well, not at that point, but I've seen the ducks in other locations now. Once I discovered what they were, then whenever I would see ducks, I would be able to identify them. And as it turned out, they were northern shoveler ducks, which looked a bit like mallard ducks, but except for one thing, they have large bills, and that was the main difference.
Before this kind of incident with the ducks, were you a bird guy? Did you do any bird watching? Could you name one type of duck from another?
No, I could say I knew what a mallard duck was, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what the other ones were. So basically, I was kind of ignorant about birds. Obviously everybody knows what a robin is and an eagle is, but and otherwise, none of the smaller birds really were identifiable by me.
And so what made you kind of want to get into this and learn more and more and more about this world?
Well, actually, it was really exciting. It was really exciting to see new birds, to discover that there are a ton of birds in my own neighborhood that I had never really identified before. And just, the whole idea of sort of learning about something new and something that was really interesting and all
and
around us.
How do you take good photographs of birds? Do you have any tips for photographers?
Yeah, the main tip is you got to get good equipment. A lot of people start out with, going halfway and getting a lens, a zoom lens that say goes up to 200 millimeters, but you really need something, that goes up to at least 500 millimeters, 600 millimeters is even better. And nowadays there's a lot of options. So to start with, yes, you need good equipment, but by the same token, there's also a lot of new cameras coming on the market that don't require the large equipment like they did when I first started. When I first started, the biggest lens I could get was a 300 to 800 millimeter lens, and it weighed 13 and a half pounds. These days, with the higher megapixels and better lenses, you can get away with something really small. In fact, I think, in the near future, you won't need anything more than a good iPhone.
And can you tell me maybe about the work that goes in behind the scenes, what you don't see in the photos? For example, maybe how much time it takes to wait to get some of these shots?
Oh, yeah. Patience is really important. But the other thing is sometimes you get lucky, too. So, for example, you can just be driving along and suddenly you spot some eagles in the air and they hook their claws and you just stop, pull over, and you got your shot. Other times you can sit and wait for hours and hours for some action from some birds, and it may or may not happen. So patience is really important. But again, luck plays a bit of a part too.
Other than those kind of encounters of serendipity, how do you find the birds to photograph in the first place?
Well, for example, in the eagles, it really helps to sort of know their activities throughout the year. For example, we know that in around the 1st of October, early October, that the resident nesting eagles will return from their migration. And then after they return, they start working on their nests. So that's a great time to look for shots of them bringing sticks to their nests and doing repairs to the nest. After that, it's survival time. They have to bulk up for the winter, and it sort of coincides with the salmon spawning. So the salmon spawning is usually good and keeps them into food for about, say, till into early December. But after that, when the salmon runs out, it's what I call scavenging time. And that's when you find them hanging around the landfills and composting plants, and they have to scavenge for a living. But come February, it's herring time, and so that's when you sort of keep an eye around the waterfront looking for herring spawn and other activities like that.
So we're just moving past herring time right now.
We are, yes, herring time, and I've been out several times watching for herring activity, but I haven't seen any yet.
In the foreword to your new book, you mentioned that against your better judgment, you've decided to create this one last book. Can you tell me what the path towards self-publishing work like this is? Well,
there's several kinds of self-publishing. And in my case, I work right from first principles. In other words, I do all the photography, all the writing, all the layout, all the design, all the editing, etc., all by myself. And then I just send in my file to a printing company and it's printed. So if you're going to be a self-publisher, the other thing you have to worry about is the marketing. And the first principle of marketing is you have to have a price that's affordable. And to keep it affordable, I have to order a fairly large quantity of books. Like, for example, my first book, I ordered 3,000 copies. And this one, I'm actually ordering 1,500 copies. And so that's the only way to keep the price down is to order, a large amount of books.
And where will the books be available? Where are those 1,500 copies going to go?
Well, first, I'd really like to try to sell them directly by myself, because that way I can offer a lower price. But if that doesn't work, then I'll have to get them into bookstores. And I found that most bookstores up and down Vancouver Island are quite happy to carry my books.
What is it about eagles that maybe you saw that captivated you, that you want to share with other people, that you want other people to know about?
Well, I think everybody recognizes the eagle, but they don't, aren't aware of their activities throughout the year. Like I mentioned, right now they're getting ready for herring time, and also at the same time they're also getting ready for nesting time. So this is the time of year that you'll start seeing them pairing up and maybe locking claws and cartwheeling, or just spending a lot of quiet time together on their favorite perch. And so I basically just wanted people to understand their activities throughout the year, and understand, why actually, like, for example, during the month of August and September, you hardly see any eagles, because they've actually migrated north along the coast to feed on their favorite salmon streams, where the spawning happens earlier than it does on the island.
Is there anything else you think it's important for folks to know about eagles here on Vancouver Island?
Well, I think, basically the whole idea of conservation is important. We've had a lot of eagle nest trees that, well, first of all, they're in short supply, because, originally the tall old growth trees were the best trees for eagle nests. But we have very few old growth trees left now, and many trees have been lost because of land claiming. And we've also lost eagle trees by people illegally cutting them down. There was a case at Fairwinds Golf Course where there was a absolutely beautiful eagle nest tree, and it was protected by law, but that didn't stop the owner from sending in some tree cutters at 3 a.m. to cut it down. And so I think the one way to help protect the nest trees is to let people know that they exist, and so there's more eyes watching. And if someone wants to cut one down illegally, there will be more people, on guard or ready to speak up to protect them.
Mike Yip is an amateur photographer in Nanoose Bay. His self-published book, A Year of Eagles, is coming out in mid-April. You can get in touch with him by email using the address admin@VancouverislandBirds.com.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
We're talking birds of prey on today's program. I got in touch with Derek Downs. He's the animal care supervisor at the North Island Wildlife Recovery Centre in Errington. Can you tell me a bit about what kinds of birds of prey we have on the island that you maybe see in your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so Vancouver Island is, by many people regarded as like kind of a birder's paradise, right? So that ranges from, songbirds all the way up to birds of prey. And, we have about 12.5 birds of prey that really are fairly common on Vancouver Island, depending on, north or south. But yeah, so we have, lots and lots. And obviously eagles, bald eagles in particular, are kind of a staple of the Pacific Northwest. And it's really an amazing place to view eagles in the wild. And so, Eagles obviously are just so majestic, and then they're kind of, again, when I say eagles, bald eagles is what I'm sort of mostly referring to.
Can you tell me maybe about there are different kinds of eagles that live here on Vancouver Island?
So we do have, there are golden eagles as well, but they're really more of an alpine species. So they're up in the mountains, Strathcona area type thing. Most people, when they're on Vancouver Island, are spending more time down by the coast, and that's where you're really going to see bald eagles. Now, sometimes people will confuse juvenile bald eagles for golden eagles. But yeah, bald eagles are certainly far more prevalent.
What do golden eagles look like?
Well, so golden eagles are more of a uniformed brown. It can kind of have a little bit of an auburn hues to them, and they obviously have a golden sort of nape on the back of their head, and they don't have a very obvious characteristic white head and white tail feathers of a mature bald eagle, but juvenile bald eagles will go through a color change as they mature. And so there's certain points in a juvenile bald eagle's development that, to an untrained eye can sometimes be misleading, and people can sometimes think that they're seeing a golden eagle because they have, juvenile bald eagles can have a more uniform brown appearance as they're maturing. Usually they're speckled but sometimes people just don't even really quite know that, and they just think of iconic bald eagles with, the white head and the white tail feathers, and don't even actually know that they go through a change as they mature. So that's something that, part of what we do at the center is education as well as rehab. And so, it's always interesting to talk to, people who might be visiting the island and, are really, really excited to have seen a bald eagle for the first time, and they say, "Oh, I think I saw a golden eagle down there too," but most of the time it's actually just juvenile bald eagles. And then you can kind of talk to people about the color change that they go through, and it's they're really a beautiful bird in all stages of their life.
And can you tell me about what kind of cases, what kind of birds you work with at the center?
Yeah, so we get in all sorts of birds of prey, eagles being one of them, but obviously we get hawks. Red-tailed hawks are pretty common on Vancouver Island. We also deal with a lot of owls. So barred owls have, been very, very successful on Vancouver Island, and we see them quite often. Like I said, eagles, little falcons, merlins, great horned owls. Those are all kind of your most common cases when it comes to birds of prey, but you can see sharp shins, Cooper's hawks, some of the smaller owls, so the northern saw-whits, the pygmy owls, western screech owls. Yeah, so we really actually do see quite a variety of raptors coming in, and it's indicative of the variety of birds of prey that we have living on Vancouver Island. And
what kind of things typically bring these birds into the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center?
Well, it all sort of depends. So every different species is going to kind of be eking out a living slightly differently, even though they are all, from what we just talked about, birds of prey. There's different things we see them coming in for. So, eagles, bald eagles have, a lot of different things that'll affect them. When they're staking out territory, they'll combat with other eagles, and so sometimes they get injured in that capacity. They also, unfortunately, in the first couple of years of their life, have a really hard time just making it by. And so we see a lot of first and second year birds coming in that are just starving and are really just not doing well. We also see older birds coming in that capacity as well. But so starvation can be a big one. And then vehicle collisions is another one. So sometimes birds will be feeding on the side of the road and things like that, and then we'll get hit by vehicles. Sometimes you don't know. They're just a grounded bird who can't fly. And then you, like I said, whether it's broken bones or head trauma or starvation, lots of different, those are kind of the main ones when it comes to birds of prey.
Are there any kind of bigger population level threats, let's say maybe facing birds of prey around the island that you know of?
Well, so it's sort of like there's different threats to everything, right? I mean, I'd say at the end of the day, the number one threat to, all wildlife is going to be habitat loss. And I think that's like a pretty well-known problem, and it's one that kind of collectively as a human species we need to kind of work to mitigate that however we can in any certain situation. But so habitat loss is a big one. And then, you know, for things like barred owls that are really opportunistic and really like feeding on rodents and things like that, there are certain things, like a really simple important one that we kind of pass on to people that people don't necessarily think about is you know, even throwing biodegradable things along the sides of roadways still draws rodents to the sides of roadways, and then when there's rodents there, then owls are going to come. And so we do see a lot of barred owls that are hit by vehicles, and it's because they're kind of hunting on the side of the road. And then again, I mean, circling back to the bald eagles, you know, it's no secret that some of the large feeding events for them have dwindled in years past. So things like the coming herring spawn is not quite as illustrious as it used to be in years past, and that's a really important feeding event for them. And same thing when the salmon run, you know, in the autumn, it's, you know, those populations have taken a hit, and it is certainly having an effect on wildlife, because those, like I said, are pretty important feeding events.
Do we know why there's been a change to them recently?
I mean, there's a lot of, I don't think you can ever necessarily pinpoint to one specific thing, but that is not really for me to comment on, I would say. But we certainly know that the populations aren't necessarily what they used to be for fish stock and things of that nature.
And in your position, you get up and close working with these birds. What can you tell me about those interactions?
Yeah, well, I mean, so what I can tell you is raptors are formidable, right? Even the smallest little merlins are like, they have all the attitude and ferocity of a bald eagle, but just in a really small package. And same thing with eagles, right? They're exceptionally strong, and they are really, really magnificent creatures, and they should be respected. And I think, you know, one of the beautiful things about living on Vancouver Island is, you know, we couldn't do what we do here at the rehab center without the support of the community, and we really do have a wonderful community on Vancouver Island of you know, I think majority of the people that live here really care about nature and have feel a kinship with nature and feel that feel that respect for wildlife. And dealing with eagles, you know, hands on, no matter what, when we're trying to, you know, help them, they don't necessarily see it that way, right? Because, you know, they're wildlife, they're not pets, they are wild animals. And so you have to be really cognizant of that when you're working with them, and do everything you can to protect yourself, for one thing, but also do what you can to reduce the stress on whatever animal you're working with, in this case eagles. And make sure that at the end of the day, you know, you're hoping for a positive outcome for them.
You mentioned that another one of your big goals is education. Is there a message you'd like to pass to the public around birds of prey?
I mean, I think they really are just such a wonderful species, group of animals that are so endearing, right? There's so much that you can learn about them, and things that people might not know. And so we have a pretty illustrious grounds here. We have 8 acres where people can come and partake in various different educational programs that we run, as well as just tour the grounds and the signage and our permanent residents that we have. Again, a vast majority of those are raptors that came in with injuries that preclude them from being released. And so we are able to give them a home and have them act as educational ambassadors and help bring awareness to the species, and give people a chance to get up close and see something that they live side by side with, but maybe never quite know that. And so, yeah, it's definitely a multifaceted thing here. And like I said, we're a full non-for-profit, and so any money that we get through admissions goes straight back into rehab. And so that's, it's really just a huge part of what we do is also education, and it's a really wonderful thing.
Derek Downs, thank you so much for making some time to chat.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good one.
Derek Downs is the Animal Care Supervisor at the North Island Wildlife Recovery Centre in Arrington. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.